I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
We are Velocities in Music. On this podcast, Tom and I discuss a bulge of topics pertaining to modern music, including artist deep dives and monthly music wrap-ups. This week, it's a topic.
Yes.
Genre bias.
Genre bias.
How it affects the listening experience. Does it prevent us from objectively listening to and understanding an album? Before we get started, you can help support Velocities in Music. Subscribe to Velocities in Music on your favorite podcasting device to automatically get our latest podcast episode sent to your device each week. Also, Velocities in Music does not want your money. We also don't want to introduce ads to this podcast yet. Right now, all we want is for you to share Velocities in Music with family or friends whom you think would benefit from joining in on the music discussion Tom and I attempt to create every week. So, Tom.
Yes.
How did the topic of genre bias grace us with its presence?
This is something that you and I have been talking about somewhat informally for many years. But it just cropped back up when a listener, a fellow named Morwan, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
And if not, we apologize.
You know that we're
Iowa.
Terrible at pronouncing
We can't
things.
help it.
Anyway, Morland sent us an email and said, I want your thoughts on genre bias. In summary, really pointed out a lot of things about it. When does genre bias prevent someone from liking an album that they might otherwise like? And this is something that you see all the time. I mean, just go ask anyone, what kind of music do you like? And I bet you they'll say, everything but blank.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, you hear everything but metal. Oh, I listen to everything except for modern pop country. Like, okay, that's the kind of response that you'll get. And the point that Morwan was making in the email was, how does this affect listeners? How does this affect us?
Right.
Morwan called us out for not really discussing reggae, as like maybe we have an aversion to reggae, which actually we don't, so we'll want to address that. But when does genre bias affect us as listeners, Jake and I specifically, but how does it affect other listeners? How does it affect the populace?
Tom, what are your favorite genres in music?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, if we're going high level, I got to say rock. I'm a rock and roll guy.
That's too high level.
That's too high level.
That's like saying indie. You
Yeah.
can't say indie, remember?
Indie is not even a word anymore. It doesn't mean anything. I like 90s rock, 90s alternative rock, grunge. I really like a lot of classic rock, a lot of progressive rock. Yes, King Crimson, Rush. I like a lot of 60s pop and rock, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, early rock and roll. I also like a lot of funk, George Clinton. I like soul, Motown. I mean, I could keep going. Those are probably some of my favorites. But
are there any genres you just genuinely don't like?
There are, and I'm gonna cite the example that I used earlier of modern country and pop country. I can't stand it.
Yeah, and when people ask me this question, which people who know me know that we do this podcast, Tom, and so I'm asked this question: what kind of music do you like? And I have a really hard time answering that question because because Velocities in Music has forced me into positions over the last 6 years where I've had to listen to music that I just naturally didn't like. Now, when we set out to do Velocities in Music, it was, late 2009 when we got the idea, very early 2010 when we started Velocities in Music. And at the time, I absolutely hated metal.
Yep.
Did not really like hip hop. Mm-hmm. And generally just liked kind of it's really hard to describe because how I want to describe it is indie. Yeah. Indie, very aesthetic, indie rock / pop, somewhere in the vein of like something like and with a dash of folk in there too, like something like the Decemberists or Andrew Bird, Arcade Fire, artists like that.
I find you tended to like a lot of music that had a very kind of charming, endearing, even sometimes kind of twee quality to it.
It absolutely did. And I used to describe this as I want to listen to aesthetic music. Aesthetic. But that was such a load of shit, guys. That was such a load of shit because the word aesthetic is going to mean something different to every single person, just as every single person is going to have a set of genre bias that is they're naturally going to be predisposed to some genres over another. And it's just the way our brains work, right? Yeah. But that's not to say, in my mind, that that's a definite thing. You know, our taste, both whether that's food, whether that's you know, like whether it's music, whether it's just, you know, just what we like in people changes over time as we change over time. Especially, you know, when we started this time, like it was 6 years ago now. I'm 28. I was 22 when we started this, and from 22 to 28, many life events have happened in my life, and I've grown up a little bit. Admittedly, you know, I've hopefully matured some, not enough, obviously, but my thoughts and outlook on the world has changed, and therefore I've just naturally become, I think, more open to other ideas. And Velocities and music forced me into listening to music that put me outside of my comfort zone. I remember the time when I first remember going, holy crap, I'm loving a metal album. Yeah. Do you know what album that was, Tom?
There were two that I remember.
There were two
really liked,
but there was one that put it over the top.
Was it Glassjaw's Worship and Tribute?
It was not.
Was it RX Bandits Mandala?
It was not.
No?
That one, RX Bandits, that one I started to get the allure. But at that point,
I remember you saying, because that's not really a metal album, but it features a lot of metal guitar and metal traits. Yeah. So I know that was kind of like an entry point to you to some degree.
Yeah, but at that point I was also very into the Mars Volta.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I just didn't like heavy music. I mean, my dad raised me on Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. Which
means you're predisposed to some degree to like that kind of stuff.
Like classic rock was in my blood. I felt like. So it naturally, like, there were things that I was listening for. I was listening for that intensity provided by big dynamics and you know, just large guitars and guitars that work their rear ends off, making the sound like what I heard in Led Zeppelin growing up. Yeah. And you know, the album that did it for me was Review Number 100, Master of Puppets. Metallica's Master of Puppets, and I remember, and that was just so out of my comfort zone. And you had made me listen. Really, you had forced me to listen to Metallica many times before, and it had never clicked. But trying to think of it objectively, to sit down and listen to something that I genuinely didn't like and think of it objectively, something clicked inside my head, and I realized kind of what Metallica's whole shtick was, which. There was a beauty to it, and I remember specifically you and I had this like in-depth conversation at my apartment, and we were sitting on, you know, couches, and I was at my computer, and you were on the couch, and we were sitting there talking about. I had used the word, I like aesthetic music, and you said exactly what I just said a few minutes ago, which is that means something different to everybody. Metal music is soothing to me. That was your words.
It's beautiful,
and something started to click, and it took a while to fully sink in. Many more albums had to be listened to and appreciated before that really was cemented in my mind. But now when somebody asks me, like, what music do you like, I have a really hard time answering it. Yeah. Just from the standpoint that I know that I can like any kind of music if it's done very well. Right. If it's very thoughtfully composed, carefully crafted. If there's usually, you know, all the things that go into what makes an album great, and the podcast we did on that, if it has a number of those attributes, I'm gonna be more predisposed to liking it.
Yeah. The more and more music that I listen to, the more I realize that genre is really just kind of an artificial construct. It's trying to pull threads that are similar between certain albums or artists and trying to make comparisons, and I think that's a worthwhile exercise. But when you define everything about music by that, then really what you're doing is kind of limiting yourself. And I would defer to what you said, Jake, that like, who cares about genre? What you want is something that will give you an artistic and meaningful experience. I don't care what genre that is. I will say that I think that there are some genres that naturally are better suited for that kind of experience, and I think that comes with the less business-like and superficial an album or artist is. You know, I think the more that the deeper you get into the pop scene and pop music, it's made as a product, not as a work of art a lot of times. And so naturally, for someone like me, I think that's harder to connect to. But when you actually just break it down to melodic construction and things like that, there isn't necessarily anything inherently wrong with that. It just depends on what you're looking for. Sure. But there are a couple things that I think really prevent people from getting into music that they're not inclined to like right away. There's two main things. First, I think a lot of people just flat out don't care. Jake, you and I, we embarked on a journey to challenge ourselves and listen to as much music as we could, whether we loved it, whether we hated it. And I'm a true believer in the idea that you have to mix the bad with the good. You have to force yourself to listen to music you don't like, to watch movies you don't like, to eat food you don't like in order to determine what you do like. And through that journey, you end up adapting and changing. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to end up liking everything, and I would never be pretentious enough to say that anyone would ever like everything, because I just don't think that's attainable, nor should it be a goal for anyone.
No
I
matter
don't think
how
that's
hard,
the point.
No matter how hard I try, I will never like Bright Eyes.
That's fair.
Ever.
That's fair. But the thing is, you know why. And I'm sure that if I put you on the spot right now, you would be able to articulate why.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't think that people really bother to do that. And not everyone's going to care about this stuff as much as you and I do, Jake. I think that's only natural. And I don't...
Are you saying we're weird?
Maybe a little bit. We are sitting, sipping drinks on a Monday night talking about music in my house.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Most
people
weird.
are hanging out with their families or...
Whatever.
Having a good time.
This is what I'm all about.
This is
right
what
here.
we do.
Yep. So a lot of people just don't care, and that's perfectly natural. I had this conversation with my family. I was at my dad's for Christmas, and me and my brothers and my dad and my stepmom were talking about music, and two artists that I brought up as being kind of out there were Ween and Captain Beefheart. And
Captain Beefheart is not kind of out there, Tom. Captain Beefheart is just about as far out there as you can get.
Right, and that's why I love him. And I was like, this kind of music, you're not going to like and appreciate the first time you listen to it. And my stepmom made the point, then why do you force yourself to listen to it? Why, if you don't like it? And she had a good point, but I also think she was misinterpreting what I said. And what I had to clarify was, whoa, I never said I disliked it. I just didn't love it when I first listened to it.
Sure.
But the whole point about music like that is that there is something that keeps me coming back. And part of it is just the sense that I'm stubborn. I like to challenge myself, and I like to learn about myself. I like to figure out why I do or don't like things or do or don't think a certain way, and I question myself constantly. So artists like that, I remember very distinctly the first time I ever heard Trout Mask Replica, now one of my favorite albums ever. And the first time I liked it, or the first time I listened to it, I wasn't big on it. But there was something so intriguing about it that I absolutely could not resist coming back to it. And I had to figure it out. It was a puzzle that I had to solve. And once I did, I loved it. Mm-hmm. And there are some albums that I go through that exercise with that I don't end up liking, and that's fine. I don't push myself to, but I push myself to find out why. And I think if people bother to do that, then they would know. And so I think the first reason is some people just don't care enough to do that. They hear something they don't like, they don't see it as an intellectual or personal pursuit that they want to follow. They just think, well, that's not bringing any joy to my life, so I'm just going to ignore it.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I hate to sound a little jaded here, but I just think that some people are way too egotistical to question themselves. Part of the reason I am always listening to music that I don't like, that maybe someone has recommended, is because I walk into every situation just assuming that I am wrong. It's just my personality.
I assume you're wrong too.
That's a smart choice. You've also known me long enough to know better. So, but that's what I do. Just naturally, I tend to question myself and doubt myself because I want to make sure that what I believe, not just musically, I do this politically, I do this ethically. I always do this just so that I know that what I believe is truly what I believe, and that there is something backing that up. And not everyone does that. Once again, I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm not trying to get on a high horse. I'm just saying that's just the way I'm wired. That's my personality, and so it happens to come out in the way that I listen to music. And I think that if you go through that, it can circumvent a lot of the natural genre bias because you're giving things a chance that you wouldn't normally. But not everyone cares enough to do that, and that's fine.
So where do you think genre bias stems from? How does it develop? How does one even come up with a genre? It's not like our good friend Quinn.
Yeah.
And for a long time only liked indie folk in folk music that was slightly poppy, had a lot of bright pop hooks to it. And it was so predictable, the albums that we would listen to as we were reviewing albums for Velocities of Music, what albums our dear friend Quinn would like, that I could recommend him something and be like, you're going to love this. And he either would or wouldn't, just based on the fact that we had listened to it and it met those characteristics. But I don't believe, in Quinn, if you're listening to this, I apologize for picking on you. I don't believe that Quinn just set out one day and said, I'm going to like indie folk music. I don't think that it was a conscious decision that a person makes, that they're only going to like one type of music.
Yeah.
But yet somehow we're drawn to certain types of music. And I don't feel, I personally don't think that like just natural draw to a certain type of music really stops. I will always remember the first time I heard Radiohead.
Yeah.
It really changed the way that I think my mind is wired about music, because I remember getting this like physical sensation in like the sides of my thighs. And as weird as that sounds, as weird, because it's weird, don't get me wrong, but I remember just being so excited that like something was so intriguing that it like drew me in. And then I had absolutely hated Radiohead the first time I heard them. So I had heard them many times, and then like all of a sudden it just hit me, and it was like, there's something here that is actually really interesting that's going on. And I have found that more often than not, the albums and the bands that I really fall in love with, I didn't like to begin with. And I think that that's such an interesting conundrum to try to piece apart.
Sure. So that feeling that you got when Radiohead finally clicked with you, I think that a lot of music fans, big music junkies like us, have those experiences with a lot of artists that they love. And a lot of people don't get that from music at all. Maybe they get it from sports. Maybe they get it from games. I don't know. There's all kinds of different things to be into. But wouldn't you say that part of the reason we pursue music so aggressively is because we're constantly seeking that same high? We're constantly looking for something that will give us that feeling again, because we know that it's out there, and we know that it's attainable because we've experienced it before.
Yeah, and it's usually accompanied by a huge binge.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I've had several artists over the years that I've found that I've had that same thing where Lost in the Trees, 2012.
Oh, yeah.
A Church That Fits Our Needs. That album, I remember just not liking that whatsoever. But on the third listen, started to like it a little bit more. And by the fourth or fifth listen, I was texting you going, this might be the album of the year. I know it's April. This might be the album of the year. Hey, I'm going to listen to this 20 more times in a row. And you did. And I did. And and that was one of those experiences that has, and that helps cement that album as one of my favorites of all time, right? Because I went through that experience.
Right.
And but it is a quest. And I think that's honestly, it's one of those things that have driven, our real drive to continue Velocities in music is because I'm looking for that.
Well, and it's the proverbial chicken or the egg situation, though, because, nostalgia plays a huge part in it. But the first time you listen to something and like it, you can't chalk it up to nostalgia. So at what point do you love something because it reminds you of when you were a kid, or you associate it with the first time you heard it and you liked it? To what degree does that play a part, and to what degree does just the music itself play a part? Because those are two entirely different things. For sure. And that's something that is important too, is just, I think that there's a historical and social and cultural aspect of it that we can't overlook. And that just has a lot to do with luck. It has to do with the way that you were raised, and very circumstantial things that you might not have any control over. I mean, it's all opportunity. It's kind of luck of the draw. You can hear something one day and it won't click with you, and then after some life event or in some certain situation, or maybe the weather's just right that day, all of a sudden something resonates with you in a way that it didn't before. I think that there's just a lot of luck and timing that plays into it, but I think you compound those incidents, those occurrences over your entire lifetime, and they're not isolated incidents. I think they build off of each other, and the first handful of times that happens to you determines a direction that you go in musically and what you're drawn to, and then you're naturally just predisposed to try to find those things. But I think that there are some of us who try to expand into other experiences and other music in a way that it kind of avoids the rut that you might get into if you don't care as much.
So let me ask you this, because when we started Velocities in Music, I was certainly, I felt more guarded by genre than I think you were. I think you already, loved metal, liked a lot of the indie music that I was into at the time, and you loved, rock, progressive rock music. You loved hip hop. So from your standpoint, when I was experiencing, I would say high levels of genre bias on a regular basis, essentially Velocities in Music was pushing me out of my comfort zone on a regular basis. From your perspective, did it prevent me from objectively listening to an album and giving my thoughts on that?
No,
album?
it didn't.
You don't think so?
I honestly don't. I don't think so.
I would disagree.
Really?
Oh,
well,
absolutely.
Well, I don't know what was going on in your head, but what I mean is this. When you and I first got started doing album reviews, there was some stuff that you really didn't like. Metal was one of them. But, as you mentioned, you weren't big on hip hop. But the thing is, I feel like you always gave the album the listens and justified your viewpoint.
Sometimes I had to work so hard to do that.
Well, it is work sometimes because you're working against yourself.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
To try to get around your own biases and your own predispositions.
I just remember there were so many times when I was listening to this record going, man, I really don't like this, but I can't put my finger on why. Yeah. And just having to listen to the record over and over again, forcing myself to figure out why I didn't like it.
Sure.
And maybe that's what helped me gain an appreciation for that side of the music. And I remember one of those albums was Chevelle.
Was that when we did Sci-Fi Crimes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I learned about my taste in music is I really don't like it when artists, and Chevelle did this on their album Sci-Fi Crimes, when they use that verse chorus structure, that generic pop structure, that really bothered me. And but that, like, going through that exercise forced me into understanding why.
Right.
The other side of that coin is now when I heard in the future, when I listen to albums, especially heavy albums that didn't rely on that structure, I go, well, this is interesting.
Yeah.
This is interesting. They're doing something a little bit different that I haven't heard before. And then, and then it was the screamy vocals. And it's like, oh, well, why do I not like the screamy vocals? What are they doing that's such a crime? Oh, well, they're so loud, they're actually distracting from all the other stuff that's going on. And then I hear an artist like Def Heaven and their album, their 2013 record, Sunbather, where the vocals are screaming, but they're done tactfully and mixed properly. So that they don't actually distract from all the wonderful instrumentation. And I love it.
Yeah, you hated that vocal style up until around that time, and a couple other albums. I remember we reviewed Deathspell Omega's Paracletus, and we both loved it.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of it had to do with the mixing. The mixing and the production and the vocal style. I mean, it can completely affect the experience of a metal album. It's huge. So this actually brings up a good point, because this reminds me of a conversation that I had with my brother's girlfriend, and who hates metal music that is screamy. And this actually, I'm going to give a few examples of people that I know that just have come out to me and said that they hate a certain genre for a certain reason. And you'll see where I'm going with this once I get a little bit into it. So one of them was, like I said, my brother's girlfriend hated metal music. She said that kind of screaming just doesn't take any talent. And I put that in quotes. You can't see me, but I'm doing my air quotes. And that comment always frustrates me, because to me it just displays a level of ignorance. Of course it takes talent to do that.
Have you ever screamed like that?
And people try and tell me...
I haven't. I haven't, because I don't want to lose my voice.
Right. People try and tell me, that isn't... anyone can just do that. And I challenge them to say, do it. Right now, you scream like the guy from Def Heaven, or you scream like Chino from Deftones, or name a band. It takes an insane amount of talent, the physical endurance, the awareness of your own body to be able to produce that kind of sound consistently and reliably without just blowing your voice out. Takes an insane amount of talent.
And then to do it night after night on a tour.
Right. Now, you compare that to, the likes of big-voiced pop divas like Whitney Houston, or I don't know why that's the first name I came up with, but she's a fantastic vocalist. Does it take more or less talent to do one or the other? I don't know, because I think you're comparing apples to oranges. It's a completely different style. It's a different approach. I don't think the metal singers could sing like Whitney Houston. I don't think Whitney Houston could sing like the metal singers.
Right. And moreover, I mean, if the point that you're trying to make by making that criticism is, well, these people obviously didn't have, a number of years of professional vocal training. Well, then, if that's what you're looking for, then that's a very, very
it's a limited
it's a very limited scope of what you're
right.
listening to, and there's artists out there that can fulfill that need, and
right.
But like obviously, I think that the general, like, if a person is like, if you ask a person, are you into music? Are you into music? Most people are going to say yes. But if you ask a person, what type of music are you into? And they say, well, I really like a certain artist or two, you know that they probably don't really like music, right? But if they can name genres and talk about different artists within those genres, well, then you probably have a music fan on your hand. Now, they might not be fully inclusive of like all these different genres or know everything. And Tom and I, meet people all the time who, even though we've, run a music review and, an independent music review website and now do this independent podcast, like we run into people all the time that listen to way more music than we do, that have this level of expertise when it comes to music. They know every subgenre and every artist in that subgenre and every little detail of every major album that came out in every subgenre of all time. It's mind-blowing how much some people know out there. And I really admire those people, but at the same time, it's like, that's not where I'm at, so it's hard to relate.
Well, and it's tough too, because there's so much music out there that it's like you can either hyper focus on one genre and all of its subgenres and ignore everything else, or you can get like a smattering of everything. I feel like you and I fall into the latter category because we naturally like a lot of different kinds of music and we don't want to limit ourselves. But I think one thing that plays into that is also how you relate to the music. If you're looking at it from a more intellectual standpoint, or if you connect to it from a more emotional standpoint. The example I gave of, my brother's girlfriend not liking metal music, and she says that vocal style doesn't take any talent. Well, to me, that just says she doesn't understand what goes into it. And if for her to like music, it takes an understanding of what that musician is going through and what they are having to do, the acumen that is necessary to accomplish the sound that they are doing, then no, she's not going to like that if she can't connect to it.
She's not going to like a lot of types of music.
Right, exactly. Another person who actually made the same comment, they said it doesn't take any talent to do this. She was talking about hip hop. As a different person entirely. They're saying, I just don't think it takes any talent to rap. Once again, I mean, that's just blatantly not true. That frustrates me because that's not something you get an opinion about. You don't get to have an opinion about whether something takes talent or not. You can make opinion-based statements of, I do or don't like this, but you don't get to just say this style of music takes no talent. But I just interpret that to mean, not only do you not like it, but I also just take that as meaning you don't appreciate it, you don't respect it from an artistic standpoint because you don't understand what goes into it.
I remember in the early 2000s a similar criticism than the it doesn't take talent, it doesn't take any talent to do that genre or to do that style of music criticism. I remember being into just like some generic hip hop that was popular at the time, and listening to a couple of those songs. And I remember having this conversation with my dad, who, keep in mind, earlier in this conversation, raised me on classic rock, The Who, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, that sort of thing. And I remember him saying, rap is a limited art form. Rap is a limited art form. Hip hop is a limited art form. What crap! I mean, listen to Kendrick Lamar. Listen to any of his albums in 20. Listen to Pimp Butterfly 2015. You're gonna realize how non-limited rap is as a genre.
Yeah, it all depends on how you connect to the music. People connect to rap and hip hop based on mainly the lyrics and the rhythm. Those are the main aspects. I think that the reason people like my friend who said that hip hop doesn't take talent is they're probably looking for melody. And if you're looking for something melodic and maybe more structured, you're probably not going to like hip hop. Another problem is people can make sweeping statements about genres like that maybe they don't know about because they don't like it, so they haven't explored it. If all you do is listen to the hip hop that's on the radio today, I wouldn't blame you for not liking hip hop.
Well, and that's a great point. Like, part of it is I think that we're just naturally trained to need that sugary pop hook.
Yeah.
Whether it's an actual pop song or not. Many genres, as you pointed out, country. There's many rock acts that do this as well. And even hip hop focus on this just generic, bland 4/4 chorus where it just repeats the same vocal hook over and over again, and that's how this song is just gets stuck in your head. It's like a commercial. And from my perspective, what's happening is we are actually getting trained that we need that. And once we develop a reliance on that, listening to some music that does not have that structure or that repeated pop hook to be the foundation of the song, it's really hard to bridge that gap, and it takes a lot of work.
And you just made me think of something I'd never thought of before, and this is what I love about this, what we're doing right now. So for those of you listening, just so you know, Jake and I did not prepare for this at all.
What are you talking about, Tom? We spent hours working on this.
Right. No, we just wanted the conversation to roll. And one thing I just thought of is think about how you were raised on music, or I should say how the average child is raised thinking of music. You hear really simple, catchy songs that are meant to help you develop cognitively. It's the wheels on the bus go round and round. It's I don't freaking know. I can't remember all those songs anymore because I'm too old and I don't have kids. So I would rely on you for that one.
I don't let my kid listen to that crap.
And because of that, don't you think he'll probably listen to more music as he gets older?
I mean, maybe.
This is something that now I'm not saying that it's impossible to get out of that as you grow up if that's what you're raised with, but I think that growing up in a family that has musical appreciation is huge, because when you're a kid, that's how you develop. That's what teaches you to value certain things and certain aspects of everything about life. It's what makes you place value on anything.
So you're arguing, there's nature versus nurture when it comes to genre bias.
I think that there is some of that.
Interesting.
And if music to you growing up is just hearing what's on the radio and hearing these kids' songs, then you're probably more inclined to like a certain kind of music, probably what pop caters to.
I got to be honest, Tom, I don't think I can follow you on this one.
You don't think so?
I mean, maybe loosely. That plays into it.
I'm not saying it determines everything, but I think that it's got to contribute a little bit.
Maybe.
I just don't see. My point is, I don't see someone who grew up only listening to what their parents had on the radio and kids' songs, all of a sudden one day waking up and they're in middle school and they're like, hey, I like Throbbing Gristle and the Smiths. So, I don't think that's going to happen.
So, funny story. And, being in my late 20s and having a young child, this has been something, for those of you who don't have young children or haven't gone through this, the day and age that we live in, it is incredibly difficult to be a parent. There's also a lot of resources available to you, and you would think it would be easier, but with great power comes great responsibility and great expectations, right? If you do anything wrong, you are judged as a bad parent. And I think this is a whole subject. I'm not trying to take us down a tangent, Tom. Just bear with me.
That's great.
But I think that this is where the whole helicopter parent thing comes from, is that everyone's trying to just be the best that they possibly can be. They want to be the best parent ever, and they try so hard that they actually fail miserably. And I'm gonna just flat out admit my wife and I are guilty of this. One of the things, musically, bringing this back to an actual topic that pertains to this discussion, is you're supposed to play newborn babies on until they get older classical music. Baby Einstein. My kid watches this show called Little Einsteins. It's a Disney Junior show, and he thinks he's a little over 2, and he just thinks the show is the best thing that ever happened. And throughout the show, these kids are either singing classical music or they're listening to different. They loop in different parts of they pick a different classical piece from a classical artist for each episode, and then they loop that into the show somehow. And then the kids, as they're going through their little mission, they have to identify the song to solve their puzzle that they're on. And anyways, but the whole thing is, kids need classical music and they will become so much smarter. I don't buy into this crap for a second. Now I fully admit that we've done this, because why not? If I don't do it, I'm going to get judged for being a bad parent. So I have to I'm obligated to do this. So my kid listens to some classical music.
Sure.
Do I think that he's going to grow up loving classical music? No, he's not, because he's going to rebel. He's going to think that classical music is the worst thing that ever happened, and he's going to want to listen to something that I absolutely hate, which is probably pop country. He'll probably want to listen to pop country at some point in time, just to spite me, right? Like that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. That's a good point, and there is that aspect of it too. And once again, I'm not trying to say that determines everything, but I think it might play a factor in it. There's also just that generational gap. I grew up listening to Metallica and loving Metallica, and that didn't stop my parents from hating Metallica. But I still listened to it, and they still let me listen to it because they were encouraging of just me fostering an appreciation for music at all. So whether it was Metallica or, my parents knew I listened to the Beatles too. So it's like, well, shit, if he's listening to the Beatles, whatever else he listens to, can't be all bad, right? So I think that there is that aspect of it just in what you value and what you're raised with. But I don't mean that in just like in terms of us in small town Iowa as opposed to the person next door. I mean like us in small town Iowa versus kids in Italy and kids in China and kids in Africa. There is a cultural element to it that I think will naturally resonate with you more than it might for other people. Now, I am a true believer of the idea that music is an art and music should transcend any of that kind of cultural barrier. In fact, I think that's what makes music so special, is that an appreciation for the same kind of music can connect people in a way in which they might not have anything else in common, where they come from, what their interests are, religion, anything. Like music can bring people together in a way that transcends that. And that's one of the things I love about it. And really genre bias is something that I feel like you kind of have to get past in order to get to that point. So in our listeners' email that kind of spurred this conversation, Jake, we were called out for never talking about reggae music. And I thought that was such an interesting comment because I actually really like reggae music. I don't listen to it all the time, but every now and then I go back and I listen to, like, Heart of the Congos is a great album. I like Lee Scratch Perry and the Upsetters. I like Bob Marley. And I also like a lot of reggae-influenced music.
Well, that's also, like, one of the things we focus on this podcast is new music, and there just simply isn't a lot of reggae music coming out.
That's very true. That's a good point also, is that it's not as much of a contemporary genre right now, but there's still a lot to dig into in the past. But part of the reason, to be perfectly transparent, part of the reason that I don't talk about reggae on here is just because I know that it's kind of a weak spot in my knowledge base.
For sure.
I don't have the cultural history. This is something too that you guys got to understand. We run a podcast, we run music reviews, we talk about music, and there are a lot of people out there who try to be pretentious and exclusive about it. And it's difficult to get past. And Jake and I are just not really willing to put ourselves in a position to just be chewed out by an elitist group of people about a particular genre. Because let me tell you, we have heard it all. Us being two white guys in our 20s in Iowa, the USA, there's plenty of things that people can say.
I mean, if you're going to stereotype, we should never be able to pronounce anything correctly, and which is true, and only listen to country music,
right?
Like crappy, pop country.
But my point is in 2016, when you can listen to almost anything thanks to the internet, no matter where you live geographically, no matter how you're raised. I don't feel like there's the excuse for that, and I'm not going to give it to those people. I'm not going to the people who try to say you don't have the right to talk about this, because you're a white dude from Iowa. Like, I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of trying to get on that high horse. I'm just going to appreciate the music that I like. And so, yes, I do listen to reggae. I really enjoy it as a genre. There's a lot of positive traits, and every now and then I'm just in the mood for it. But I do feel like there is music like that out there that you do have to have a certain knowledge base in order to really have a constructive conversation around. And I don't feel like you and I have ever gotten to that point with reggae. I think that it took us long enough to even dare address the topic of hip hop, because that tends to be the same way. A lot of hip hop fans are rabid, and they are very territorial and protective of their genre. And so if you say something, not necessarily even something that they disagree with, but if you say something that is inaccurate slightly, or you're not giving all the details because no one can know all the damn details, then they'll eat you alive.
Sure.
And at some point you have to ask yourself, is it worth getting into?
I mean, so besides the obvious that we keep saying, we have a genre bias, it's really crappy pop country.
Yeah.
Like that's just I fully admit that
Yeah.
I have a bias against pop country. Another genre bias a genre that I wouldn't say, I guess I'm biased against this, but like I'm certainly not going to ever go listen to an album on my own choosing in this genre is jam bands.
Yeah.
Like Widespread Panic, even Fish. And I've listened to a couple Fish. I know.
I got a Fish poster
right
on the wall here.
Even Fish. Like I never get the urge to listen to Fish. It's like spaghetti. I never want to eat spaghetti, and I never want to listen to Fish. But that doesn't mean when it's on, I can't appreciate some things about it. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna love it either. I will say this: just the fact that I'm not like it doesn't, like the genre just simply doesn't excite me, does make it harder for me to objectively listen to it and understand it at its core.
Sure.
I will fully admit that. And so like when I do listen to it, so like say in the next month or two, we're doing a deep dive on some jam band, or maybe jam band as a genre or a jam band artist. It would be a struggle for me. I would really have to push myself to understand what makes me not love the genre of jam band.
So jam band is a really interesting example of this, because I was talking earlier about how I think that one of the biggest things that plays a part in genre bias is whether you connect to music more emotionally or intellectually. What's weird is, like metal, for example. Metal is, I think, a very divisive genre in that category, because there's some people who are drawn to metal for the intellectual aspects, math rock, crazy rhythms, very technical chord structures and movements, and some people are drawn to it for that reason. And then you have some people who are just meatheads who want to headbang and are more into the image of it, and I consider that to be an emotional appeal.
Disturbed.
Yeah, dude, I love Disturbed.
I know you do, and I will
don't know
never
why.
understand it. I will never understand it.
I know, I get it. But that's like that to me. Like that's the difference. What I see, and not that the intellectual metal can't have an emotional connection to, and not that the more headbanging kind of, to me, less thoughtful metal can't have some intellectual aspects of it. But I think it's a spectrum, and I think bands tend to lean more in one direction or the other, and that typically defines whether I like the band or not. Obviously, I'm speaking a little negatively about some of the bands who rely more on just like energy and heavy riffs and not much thought into. Like that's not really my kind of thing.
Except for
Disturbed and some other things that I'm just a sucker for whatever reason. Call it nostalgia. I'll blame it on that.
But it goes the other way. I mean, stuff that's just overly mathy just to be mathy.
Yeah.
It doesn't do it for me. Like I really like the balance. Like I want the sweet spot.
Yes.
Bands who can pull that off, which I would argue, bands like Death Heaven certainly exemplify that. I really find that those bands resonate with me, and it's not just that genre. It's really in every genre. Bands that find ways to be original, to have great mood and have that energy, but also find ways that they have a craft to their songwriting. There's it's full of ideas and they've chiseled away and are offering things in a way that no one else has done before, in a way that that just gets it stuck in your head, and it's a really catchy rhythm and chord progression. Like there's a lot of thought that goes into that. I want that balance.
So I'm totally with you on that. And the point that I wanted to make about jam bands is I think they're a weird breed, because I don't really know where they fall in that spectrum, because they tend to be very technically impressive and yet somehow so utterly boring. Like I don't know how it's possible. It's amazing that people can be playing such intricate, impressive music and still just bore the ever-living crap out of me. And I will never get that. But the thing that's weird about that too is like, Jake, I hate to stereotype, but you and I have been to several music festivals together. And what does the jam band crowd really look like? It's a bunch of stoned out hippies.
I mean, it's more like, what do they smell like?
Right. What don't they smell like? That is the better question.
Hey, I won't judge. I smell terrible.
Right. Yeah, I'm sweating my ass off over here. I don't know about you, but anyway.
You're a sight to behold, Tom.
God damn it. But, I mean, the thing that's interesting to me about that crowd, which obviously, I'm not trying to say that that's everyone who listens to jam bands, but come on, you can't deny it's a fair number of them. There is that subset of fans of the genre that fall into that category. And for them, it's like, they're clearly not sitting there going, whoa, that was really impressive, that solo, or the way that they got some polyrhythms between the guitar and the drums, or the way that they change that key. They're clearly not thinking of it at that level. Some of them are, but the people I'm talking about, they're more just kind of zoning out and just kind of swaying and getting into it. Right. And it's strange because it's this very intellectually performed music that is somehow in some process translating into a very emotional and almost spiritual experience for these listeners.
I just get the feeling that we're just showing everyone how absolutely ignorant we are about jam band music.
That's probably true.
We absolutely are.
Right. But I think that's why like bands like Phish piss a lot of fans of that genre off, because they appeal to the people who don't typically like that music. While then also kind of betraying, quote unquote, the people who typically who are purists of that. And I'll admit, like I said, I don't like a lot of that music, but I like Phish because I think they focus a little bit more on the songwriting and the melody than they do the extended jams, even though they do have some extended jams. So that is an aspect of it.
Do you think Phish call their diehard fans pescatarians?
God. All right, I'm just going to pretend that you didn't say that.
I appreciate that, Tom. I'm going to forget that I said that as well. So, Tom, to wrap this up, obviously, especially if you know that there's certain genres out there that you traditionally don't like, but yet you find yourself curious or intrigued by certain artists or albums that it would exist in that genre. Back years before Velocities of Music, an artist like that for me was 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah.
And in 2007, Year Zero came out. I remember buying that record, knowing that I didn't like heavy music, industrial music, and had never really, had gotten a kick out of 9 Inch Nails. I bought the album Year Zero, listened to it, and just loved it. And that was really my first exposure to 9 Inch Nails. So if someone were in that position where they were intrigued by a sound or a genre that they knew, a lot of people that they trusted or respected in their thoughts on music liked that genre, and they wanted to dabble in it, but they had to get over that natural initial genre bias.
Yeah.
What would you advise them to do?
I would say be stubborn.
Be stubborn.
Listen to it listen to it without forcing yourself to like it or expecting to like it, because I think that's a fruitless venture. It's not going to. You're not going to learn anything if you're just forcing yourself to do something for no reason. You're just going to end up hating it even more. But I would say listen to it enough that you at least find out what you don't like about it. Because, let's use the 9 Inch Nails example, Jake. Let's say that you would listen to 9 Inch Nails and you actually found that you still didn't like it. Where do you go from there? I think that where you go from there is you identify what you didn't like about it. Let's say when you listen to Year Zero, you were like, man, this is just a little too digital for me. I want something that has some of these general sounds, some of these general approaches, but maybe I want it to be a little bit more rock-based. Sure. And maybe from there you move into stuff like Marilyn Manson and Ministry. And then maybe you find that those are a little too heavy. You want something a little darker, more gothic. Maybe you listen to Depeche Mode, and eventually that gets you into older bands like Coil and some more kind of out there stuff.
Or bridges you back into 9 Inch Nails with Pretty Hate Machine.
Right, yeah. Or other albums of the same artist, because obviously artists can grow and change change over time as well. You might start with an album by that artist that you're just not going to like, and that's understandable.
So be stubborn, and if you don't like an album, take the time to invest in the album and figure out why you don't like it. Come up with specific reasons why you don't like it.
And because of that, invest in the genre. Don't take it that if what if you didn't like Nine Inch Nails and so you just wrote off the entire industrial genre? Maybe you just don't like Trent Reznor's voice.
Right.
I love it, but if you don't, that's fine.
The
that's
point
your
is
prerogative.
figure out why.
Right. And then you can take a sidestep to find other artists in that area and keep trying to hone in on it and find what attributes you value in a certain kind of music and take it from there. There's some people, there's a coworker of ours, Jake, Matt, who listens only for melody and music. Mm-hmm. And because of that, he will never like hip-hop and he will never like ambient or electronica. He just won't. True. And that's fine. But you know what? He realizes it. He knows what he looks for in music, and so he finds music that fits that mold. And I think at least that's a worthy pursuit. Because, you're not ever going to like everything, and I would hate to have someone out there get down on themselves for not liking music that a lot of other people like, because I don't think that's what it's about. It's about learning yourself and your own taste and figuring out what out there does appeal to you, while also maybe trying to grow a little bit, maybe trying to listen to stuff outside your comfort or knowledge zone, and kind of going from there.
Well, that wraps up Tom and my thoughts on genre bias and how it affects the listening experience. Next week on Velocities of Music, it's something new for us. Our first genre deep dive, grunge music.
Ooh.
Where does it come from? Who founded it? What are the seminal grunge albums? And what is grunge's impact on the wonderful world of music?
And what is Jake's genre bias to grunge? Stay in tune.
Ooh. Thank you guys for your continued support and participation. Tom and I love all of your comments on our YouTube videos, your Facebook messages, and your emails. As you can see, they can turn into whole podcasts. Your participation is what makes Velocities of Music possible. So, as always, thank you for being awesome. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
We are Velocities of Music, moving music discussion forward.